In the glittering world of royal legacy, a brooch once worn by Queen Elizabeth during her platinum Jubilee has sparked a controversy with the potential to fracture the monarchy. When Princess Anne made her decision behind closed palace doors, few anticipated the backlash, especially not Camilla. This is not just about diamonds. Tea is about power, memory, and loyalty. The Jubilee brooch, set with diamonds gifted by a former monarch and worn during the Queen's final grand celebration of her reign, shimmered with decades of unspoken stories, quiet resilience, and the weight of sovereign duty. As Queen Elizabeth's health declined, speculation grew over who would inherit the brooch and become the torchbearer of that silent but mighty legacy. Most assumed the answer was obvious. Camilla, now queen consort, had long expected it to pass to her, having endured criticism and controversy while standing beside King Charles. Royal insiders anticipated the brooch's unveiling at an upcoming state dinner as a symbolic gesture of full acceptance. Yet Princess Anne quietly appended expectations, deciding instead that the brooch would go directly to Catherine, Princess of Wales. There was no announcement, only a private handover, but the impact reverberated instantly through the palace. Whispers replaced casual conversation, and staff walked on eggshells for decades and had been the monarchy's steel backbone. Beautiful, direct, and fiercely loyal Anne, her choice, grounded not in protocol, but in memory of watching her mother navigate duty and widowhood, was final. To embroach belonged to the Queen and symbolized a trust she felt could not be conferred lightly. Within days, Camilla sensed the shift. Advisors grew tense. Conversation ceased in her presence, and the once celebratory jewel became a potent emblem of a deepening family divide. Sitting silently at the center of a fracture where it had once glittered in triumph, Camilla being passed over in favor of Catherine signaled not just a change in adornment, but a declaration about the future of the monarchy itself. To understand how this singular decision sparked royal defiance, one must trace the web of loyalties and secrets stretching back decades. Princess Anne the royal, who rarely wavers and speaks through actions rather than words, didn't just take a stand. He redrew battle lines within the monarchy. What drove the Princess Royal to sideline Kama and place her trust in Catherine lies deep within Anne's guarded heart. Long regarded as the monarchy's most unshakable pillar, and worked relentlessly and quietly embodying duty above all else. While others courted headlines or stumbled through scandal, for her duty was sacred. Even the most steadfast warrior reaches a moment when action transcends obligation and becomes defiance. In the weeks following the Queen's passing, Anne stood at a crossroads between history and conviction, and she chose conviction. The platinum Jubilee brooch, once gleaming on her mother's chest during that final public triumph, had become more than a keepsake. It was a promise that Anne could not allow to fall into hands she believed might not uphold its meaning. Her relationship with Camilla had never been warm. Beneath polite smiles lay years of unspoken tension, rooted in clashing philosophies and differences in temperament, while palace protocol demanded decorum. Fleeting glances and clipped exchanges had long revealed their friction. When the time came to decide who would carry forward a symbol as profound as the Jubilee brooch, and had no illusions about Camilla's expectations, she had no intention of surrendering the Queen's memory to political convenience. What shocked many was her decision to entrust the brooch to Catherine, not out of emotion or favoritism, but because Catherine over the years had earned a trust and respect few outsiders ever could. Respect for Catherine had not come swiftly. She had been watched, measured, and tested. Yet through storms of media intrusion, personal trials, and relentless public scrutiny, she remained dignified, dutiful, and steady. In her princess and saw something rare, someone who understood that the crown was not merely worn, but carried. Their bond had grown through subtle moments, shared causes, late-night conversations, and aligned instincts. So when decided to pass the Jubilee Brooch to Catherine, she did so with clarity. T was a message not to the public, but to the institution itself. Insiders say, and made her final decision after a private exchange with William and Catherine. No fanfare, no formalities, just a gesture of trust rooted in shared values and a vision for a monarchy that would prioritize duty over drama. And ever the soldier of the crown knew her move was not meant to provoke conflict, but to prevent one. In her eyes, Camilla's claim was based on title Catherine's on merit in Anne's world. Worth always prevailed. Yet, while Anne's decision was forged from loyalty and vision, Camilla saw it as betrayal. Having waited decades for acceptance, endured public scrutiny, and finally assumed her role as queen consort, she was confronted with a reminder that titles do not guarantee loyalty. Her fury of being denied the brooch was palpable royal reckoning, directed squarely at Anne. In the days following the discreet transfer, what had been expected to be a symbolic moment of consolidation for the queen consort instead exposed a raw nerve in the palace hierarchy. Camilla had believed the Jubilee Brooch was destined for her, a token of arrival and affirmation of her journey from scandal to sovereignty. And now that expectation lay shattered to Camilla, the brooch was not merely a gift, but a right. She had stood by Charles for decades, weathered tabloid storms, endured being cast as the outsider, and finally stepped into the role of queen beside a husband who had waited longer than any heir in British history. To be passed over now deliberately felt like a cruel undoing of all she had endured to reach that position. Behind palace walls, chaos cloaked in civility followed. Aides reported passive-aggressive commands, abrupt schedule changes, and an escalating frost from Camilla's private staff. Meetings were rescheduled at the last minute. Messages from Anne's office went unanswered, and while no direct outburst occurred, a wave of cold diplomacy swept through the corridors. Camilla didn't need to raise her voice. Her silence was sharper and her message unmistakable. She would not forget this slight. Tensions erupted when Camilla requested a private audience with Princess Anne. Though the details remain unconfirmed, multiple sources describe the encounter at Clarence House behind locked doors as anything but cordial, with raised voices, clipped tones, and a standoff between two of the monarchy's most formidable women. Camilla reportedly demanded an explanation, seeking to correct what she saw as a grave injustice, and as always offered none. She neither justified nor pleaded, simply restated her decision and left without apology or compromise. Soon, whispers reached the press. Anonymous quotes emerged, some suggesting Camilla had been blindsided, others painting and is overly controlling and traditionalist. The public narrative fractured, stories spun in competing directions. Was this a power struggle between old and new royal bloodlines, or a clash between personal legacy and institutional symbolism? Charles, caught between the two women closest to him, sought to remain neutral, though those near him admitted his discomfort was palpable. The weight of the brooch transfer was impossible to hide. Charles's own silence was deafening, and the monarchy's internal equilibrium had been rattled, leaving the burden of mediation squarely on his shoulders. For Camilla, the brooch had become a painful emblem of exclusion. Despite ascending to queen, she remained, at least in some eyes, forever an outsider. Anne's decision was more than a personal slight. It was a reminder that legacy and loyalty in the royal family are not dictated by crowns alone. They are earned, guarded, and passed forward with ruthless selectivity. Camilla had believed her place was secure, but now standing alone in her gilded role, she realized that power without acceptance is a throne with no anchor. Meanwhile, the world was about to learn of the brooch's new owner, and the choice stunned even seasoned courtiers. When the public first glimpsed the brooch glittering on Catherine's lapel during a quiet visit to a children's hospice in Windsor, shock waves reverberated among royal watchers and insiders alike. This was no mere fashion choice. It was a statement confirming what many had suspected. Catherine had been chosen over Camilla. Catherine carried herself with calm elegance, and as photographs circulated online, eagle-eyed observers zeroed in on the unmistakable sparkle of the Jubilee brooch, the very same jewel that had adorned Queen Elizabeth II during her final public celebration. In the absence of a formal announcement, the silence only amplified the gesture's power. The brooch spoke for itself, its message dissected in every detail. He timing the location, the simplicity of her outfit drawing the eye straight to the diamond cluster, and her serene, steady expression, untouched by the whirlwind she had triggered. It was not just a royal engagement, it was a silent coronation. In that moment, Catherine had not demanded a crown, but the Queen's brooch had found its way to her. A torch passed not by blood or title, but by trust. The reaction was instantaneous. Admirers hailed it as a triumph and a rightful acknowledgement of Catherine's unwavering service, while others saw it as a sharp rebuke to Kama. The brooch transfer was seen by many as a deliberate, subtle, yet unmistakable jab. Tabloids exploded with speculation, and royal commentators debated whether it had been Princess Anne's decision or the late Queen's explicit wish. Social media turned it into a symbol with side-by-side images of Elizabeth and Catherine wearing the same brooch, as if the legacy had physically leapt from one woman to another. Amid all this, Catherine remained characteristically silent in interviews. No statements or appearances marked by the same poise that had earned her loyalty from both the public and the palace's old guard. Behind closed doors, William was said to be deeply moved, not merely by the public support his wife was receiving, but by the profound weight of the moment. His mother's memory, his grandmother's standard, now carried by his wife without a single word. Those close to him noted a newfound resolve in William, an awareness that the path ahead was about more than succession was about symbolism. Catherine had been elevated in a way no formal decree could achieve. From that day forward, her presence at royal events took on new gravity. Her carefully chosen words shaped public narratives, and her role was no longer limited to Duchess or Princess of Wales. She was becoming a force, a symbol, carrying the memory of monarchs past and the expectations of a nation's future. But with the world watching and palace tensions rising, the story of how the brooch came into Catherine's hands was poised to unravel. Beginning with a long-hidden letter from Queen Elizabeth herself, tucked away in a private Windsor drawer, the handwritten letter, sealed in royal wax and held tightly by Anne, was not catalogued, not entered into any royal archive, and not composed on official palace stationery et. It held the key to understanding why Catherine had to be the one to inherit the jewel, reflecting a gesture that was at once traditional and quietly rebellious. The letter was intensely personal, penned in Queen Elizabeth's unmistakable script, folded into thirds and sealed with the wax of her private crest. A quiet, untraceable message meant not for world, but for the one person she knew would understand its meaning without question, and discovered it shortly after her mother's passing, tucked inside a box marked simply 4A. Alone in a room echoing with memory, she opened it and found words that, though neither dramatic nor long, had the power to reshape the monarchy's inner workings. The Queen offered reflection on legacy, trust, and the burden of deciding who would carry the essence of the crown into the next generation. One line circled twice Heldon's gaze. Some inherit titles, others inherit responsibility. Catherine's name appeared not in flattery, but as quiet acknowledgment woman who had weathered storms with composure, understood duty without applause, and embodied the kind of enduring strength that remains when the noise fades. It was not an order, but an unspoken invitation only, and could answer. She thought of the times her mother had confided in her, trusted her to handle the crown's most difficult matters, and realized this was the last of those responsibilities. The brooch, once a glittering accessory on the Queen's shoulder, had become a symbol of the throne's soul, and it knew precisely where it needed to go. She never shared the letter with Camilla Ot out of cruelty, but because doing so would deepen the fracture. Camilla's position was secured by title, but in believed true legacy must be entrusted to those who understand its weight before seeking its shine. Sidestepping formal channels of politics, rank, and procedure, and acted alone, privately, decisively. The Queen had asked not for committees but for trust and would not fail her. Yet the brooch had become more than jewelry. Tea was a catalyst in a growing royal Cold War. Palace corridors, once echoing with protocol, now throbbed with whispers shifting alliances and tension. What began as a discreet gesture between Anne and Catherine had quickly escalated into a defining moment. A royal power struggle playing out behind velvet curtains, raising the question of whether the monarchy could survive yet another fracture. The brooch's transfer quickly escalated into a full-scale institutional crisis. Within days of its public appearance, private secretaries, long-rusted aides, and palace insiders were drawn into hushed conversations, impromptu strategy meetings, and veiled assessments of loyalty. The matter had grown beyond symbolism. Tea was now a test of alignment. Sides were being drawn quietly, by whispers rather than force. Some believed in his decision had preserved the monarchy's dignity, anchoring legacy and substance rather than status, while others felt Camilla had been humiliated, deliberately sidelined by a faction unwilling to fully embrace her reign as queen consort. Within the palace, two narratives emerged. On one side, Camilla's loyal aides worked to protect her image, carefully crafting messages to present her as composed, generous, and above the fray. On the other, Catherine's circle, quieter and more deliberate, sought not to amass power, but to stabilize it, portraying her as the calm center of a storm she never asked to be in. These were not official factions, yet the divide was palpable from office doors to international press leaks. William observed with calculated stillness, publicly inactive. He quietly monitored every development, understanding the brooch's significance not only to Camilla, but to the monarchy itself. His silence was strategic. Each word and gesture weighed carefully, meant to tip the scale only if absolutely necessary. Across the Atlantic, Harry remained distant but vigilant, aware that the brooch's legacy carried not just royal symbolism, but maternal resonancy, shadow of Diana's absence stretching silently over the unfolding drama. Meanwhile, the real fire ignited within the Queen's old guard. Loyalists who had served Elizabeth for decades began quietly. Anne's allies moved quietly, not with speeches, but with access, influence, and strategic silence. They whispered to journalists off the record, shaped internal narratives, and subtly blocked any attempt to diminish N's role in the decision. Though gone, the late Queen's presence loomed over every conversation. Many feared that if the dispute spilled too far into public perception, it could reopen wounds the monarchy could not afford. Then came the leaks. Internal memos and quotes allegedly from unnamed senior staff surfaced in tabloids, framing the brooch as a deliberate insult or worse, a soft coup. Some accused and of overstepping. Others suggested Catherine was being used as a pawn. In truth, no one was fully in control. The narrative had escaped palace walls, and the fear was no longer just division, but exposure. A divided monarchy is a vulnerable monarchy. And behind every polished photo op, staff scrambled to maintain the illusion of unity while chaos simmered beneath the surface. Yet it was Catherine herself who shocked everyone by choosing not to stay silent. Royal women do not speak out, hey, smile, wave, and wear brooches. But at a routine charity gala, she stood before the press and public with a Jubilee brooch deliberately pinned to her lapel and delivered a veiled yet powerful statement. Her speech, while grounded in the event's theme, included a passage that felt like a thunderclap in a room ruled by whispers. She spoke of the sacred responsibility of legacy, of trust earned and lived, of memory over monarchy, and character over crowns. Every word was chosen with surgical precision. Media outlets seized upon it instantly. Headlines shifted overnight. The brooch was no longer a relic. Tea was a declaration. A silent war had received its first public volley. Fired by Catherine with calm, unwavering resolve. The public noticed, social media erupted, anchors replayed the speech, and her words hit with the force of a royal reckoning. Behind palace walls, the response was volcanic. Camilla, sources later revealed, was livid. In her eyes, it was not merely inappropriate. Tea was an ambush, a public challenge delivered with a brooch in full view, a clear statement about legitimacy and earned trust. Camilla summoned her advisors, demanded explanations, and allegedly warned Charles that Catherine had crossed the line. Even he, despite his inner turmoil, understood that the tide had turned. The public had quietly chosen its queen in waiting by lineage, but by presence. What Camilla underestimated was how quickly younger royals and palace staff began rallying around Catherine. Her authenticity, restraint, and refusal to indulge in palace theatrics won her quiet but firm allegiance, even among those long loyal to the queen consort. Catherine had weathered the storm not with defensiveness, but with composure, and the public responded with force. Polls surged, social media buzzed, and she was no longer just Duchess or Princess of Wales. He had become a symbol of quiet strength, a calm, steady heart, and a family pulled in every direction. While Catherine maintained her royal poise, Camilla's next move would escalate the quiet rivalry into open confrontation. Far from the cameras in the ancient halls of Balmoral Castle, two queens in waiting faced each other. Oh, staff, no intermediaries, just Camilla and Catherine, divided by betrayal and brought together by duty. Charles arranged a meeting, desperate to contain a feud that had grown louder behind palace walls, believing Balmoral, his mother's cherished sanctuary, would offer the privacy needed to clear the air. Invitations were quietly extended. There was no formal agenda, and was notably absent. Whether by choice or request, her absence spoke louder than any protest. Left alone, two women shaped by years of public scrutiny confronted each other over a jewel that had come to symbolize everything the monarchy both cherished and feared losing. Camilla arrived first, poised yet shaken, her tone not hostile but wounded, She spoke of sacrifice, of standing beside Charles through dark times, of enduring humiliation to finally earn a crown many believed she would never wear. Just as Camilla had settled into her role, she faced a sudden blow. The brooch she had expected to symbolize her full arrival had been handed to Catherine without consultation or warning. She described it not as a break from tradition, but as a personal betrayal, a sharp act of exclusion. Her words, though quiet, trembled beneath the weight of emotion, breaking at moments with heartbreak rather than anger. Catherine listened without interruption, and when she spoke, her tone was measured and firm, never cruel. She acknowledged Camilla's journey, the shared history and unspoken pain within the royal chambers, but refused to apologize. She had not asked for the brooch nor plotted for it. What had been given to her was a responsibility, and in accepting it, she honored Queen Elizabeth's memory rather than diminished Camilla's reign. The message was clear. The brooch had passed through trust, not power. According to insiders, the meeting ended in long silences and flurries of words, some sharp, some bitter, as allegations of favoritism, manipulation, and Anne's interference were raised. Camilla questioned the timing, secrecy, and public implications, while Catherine responded only with dignity, refusing to retract or remove the brooch. Eventually, both women stood and departed without agreement, changed but not reconciled. The encounter, never officially acknowledged, sent ripples through every corridor of the monarchy. Whispered accounts of tears, raised voices, and two royal women exposing the wounded pride, steely resolve, and burden of inheritance, often hidden behind public masks. That standoff would culminate in a quiet yet historic moment. During a rehearsal for the next state occasion, Catherine walked beside the crown, the Jubilee brooch pinned above her heart. The rehearsal, meant to be routine, became a declaration. Every step was deliberate, calm, and reverent, and standing silently at her side, her presence signaling approval. Charles observed from afar, his small, slow nod marking something irreversible. Catherine was no longer merely the future. She was becoming the present. Camilla's absence was felt like a shadow. Her silence confirmed what the brooch had already declared. Through composure, grace, and refusal to descend into palace conflict, Catherine had quietly become the people's queen. Not yet in title, but in truth. The brooch had transcended ornamentation. It was power, trust, and legacy made tangible. And in that act, the monarchy's center of gravity had shifted.